Have you ever doubted yourself, questioned your own capabilities, think other people think that you're way more capable than you think you are? Or maybe you think that you don't deserve the award, the examination grade, the job even that you've been given. If you've answered yes to any of the above, then you're probably or experiencing or have experienced something which is labeled as the imposter syndrome. And you're not alone. Depending on the research that you look at, between 57 and 75% of people at any one point in the workplace, in the UK at least, are experiencing that phenomena. But what I want to do with you today is show you a different way of working through and going beyond this particular experience so that you can start to experience even more confidence, calm, and maybe just resourcefulness within yourself. Welcome to another episode of Coming to Your Senses. I'm your host, Jules Wyman, and today it's an episode with me. And I want to talk about the imposter syndrome because it's something that comes up a lot in one-to-one coaching. It comes up in workshops. I specifically have trainings which are called in Banish Imposter Syndrome and various guises and spins of that. I do webinars and talks about it. And even when I'm doing my Truth About Confidence talks and the workshops again that spin off from that, imposter syndrome is something that always, I would wager money, always comes up in some way, shape or form. But it never used to. So I've been doing this work now for nearly 20 years. And certainly in the first decade, never really heard that phrase. I didn't really know that it was there or it existed, even though it was discovered, labeled, uncovered, studied, put together in the 70s. I don't think many people adopted it and identified with it until definitely it wasn't becoming, I'm sure it was being spoken about before I heard about it in, say, like the 2010s. But I think it became more prominent because of social media, and therefore people started to go, oh my God, yes, that's me. And that's exactly what I did. That's what happened with me. So I specialized in confidence and enabling people to have a true understanding of what it is so that they can access natural confidence and genuine confidence rather than this faking it till you make it side of things. And partway through that conversation, I must have been doing this work for about 10 years at that point when I started to be invited to some big stages. And there was one particular global stage that I was invited on. And when I'd been accepted as one of their speakers, I'd been invited also to be one of their coaches for the delegates. There's about 1,000 people at this particular conference. And I can remember being so super excited when all of that initially came through. And then I got the link with, once I'd sent all my bio and photo and everything in, I got sent the website with all of that on. I remember looking at it and this thinking started to avalanche through my head of what on earth have I done? I've only been given this gig because I know somebody who is connected to the person who organized it. This just happens to be a fluke. I don't deserve to be here. Look at all these other amazing people. They've obviously done more than I have. They're obviously way more qualified than I am. And so much of that thinking tumbled in. And interestingly, I can remember literally being sat looking at this website and it was like a light bulb went off and I went, oh, this is what people talk about when they talk about the imposter syndrome. This is this thinking stuff that's going on, that's going, I don't deserve to be there. It's just luck. It's fluke, doubting. They think I'm way more capable than I actually am, etc., etc. So all the traits that get put underneath this syndrome. Now, what I find interesting is that the imposter syndrome is not a reflection of reality. It's a perception. And it's a learned pattern. And it's a learned pattern that really does absolutely impact our reality, but it doesn't have to. When I started to see the commonality of this is when I recognized that the part of the challenge actually is the labeling of it as being called the imposter syndrome. Now, when it was initially studied and given a title in the 70s, it was actually referred to as the imposter phenomena. And I think that that's actually more accurate than syndrome, Because if we think about a syndrome, it's got a bunch of symptoms that then we can point to something and go, yes, I've got that. And it becomes an identification, which is something that is quite heavy. And many of us don't want to put down, well, if we've really identified with something, this is who I am. If you go back, for example, and listen to the episode where I interviewed Mark Gilroy, and I apologize, I can't remember what number episode. I'll maybe put it in the show notes. But Mark Gilroy talks about his, he was in a particular job, and the reference he uses is about this room. So he's built this room, which is all about this job, and he was in it for 20 years. But then he'd reached a point of knowing it wasn't serving him anymore, and he wasn't serving it in the way that he really could do, and the people around him. And therefore wanted to step out of that. But because when we get so identified with this is who I am, stepping away from that can seem very unnerving and like we are stripped naked and it's raw and uncomfortable. And so we cling on to it. Oh, well, I've got this imposter syndrome thing. And therefore that's why I'm behaving the way I am. That's why I don't apply for things or speak out or question myself or get caught up in the land of perfection over and over again. If you've listened to the first episode of Coming to Your Senses, you'll know that in the early 2000s, I experienced a breakdown. I tried different therapies, but it was coaching that truly helped me transform my life. Initially, when I discovered coaching, though, I couldn't afford it. And it was a kind soul who sponsored me not only to have coaching, but also to train and become a coach. And my promise to them was that I would pay it forward. And I've done that in many ways over the years, initially through social media and private Facebook group called Confidence Revolution, and also through Coming to Your Senses, the podcast. But it triggered for me a passion to really want to make and create a secure, supportive space for people to be able to come together and have conversations that transform their lives. So I created the Conscious Conversations community. It's a group where we meet on more than once a month. We have a focused theme, which is guided by the community and facilitated by me. There's hundreds of hours of learning and resources and materials to help you transform your life in a like-minded space. Because I get passionate about it and because this was my promise to pay it forward, I'm offering you the opportunity to trial it for £1 for the first month. If that appeals to you, then head to juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer. juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer to explore what's available for you through being part of a conscious community. When we think we're a fraud, which is interesting because that's what an imposter is a fraud, right? So if you've got imposter thinking, then the imposter part of it is saying, I'm a fraud, I've lied, I don't deserve to be here because I'm being fraudulent. Now, there isn't anyone that I've spoken to, be it one-to-one or in the workshops that I run, that when I question that, and I'm not looking to make them feel good, I want honest answers. Are you being fraudulent with your competency? And so many of them give me this kind of dazed look of going, no, of course not. Of course I'm not lying. I just don't feel comfortable about it. And I'm like, okay, well then they're two different things. Because if you're not being fraudulent, if you're not being an imposter, then we can't carry that mantle. We can't identify with it. But what we do is we have this, because we start doubting ourselves, we have this fearful thinking starts to kick in. Is this good enough? Can I do it? Is it to the standard that they're expecting? Have I done it right? There's a perfectionism thing. There's a high expectations, which are pretty much always unachievable the way that they put forward. We start comparing our inward struggles to other people's external way of being and their outward confidence. But actually, from my experience, I know that if so many people are having that internal turmoil, that's not easy to say, internal turmoil. And yet they put these masks on to just go, yeah, I've got it together. I'm all right. I'm cool. I got it together. I know what I'm doing. And that's what we see. It's the social media filter. It's the look at them, they're having a great life. And then you meet them, go, how you doing? Life looks great. And they're like, oh God, it's crap. That was just one photo that I filtered to look good. There's so many people are doing that on a day-to-day basis. They're putting on this, everything's fine, I know what I'm doing. But internally they're going, oh my God, I don't know if I'm getting this right. So if we're all experiencing that of comparing our inward struggle to somebody else's external world, then that's just not helpful. It's just not helpful to us. And what the brain tends to do, psychology, what it tends to do is have a natural negativity bias. Now, part of the reason it's done that is because it's piggybacking on the primal mind's need to look for danger. And that's great. The primal mind can crack on with doing that because I want to know when it's safe to cross the road, or whether that food maybe does look a little bit off, or whether that dark alley is maybe not the best thing to go down. That's what the primal mind's job is, because it's looking to keep this body alive and safe and well and make sure that we get through on a day-to-day basis because it wants us to stay alive. But psychology is attached to that. Our psychological mind is attached to that behavior and thinks it has to do the same thing for this imagined, yeah, but what if that happens? And yeah, but what if they say that? And what if I do this, or if I don't do that? And it starts to make up all these imagined scenarios. And that's then what we're trying to navigate. And it's not what really is. Now, what I want to share with you today isn't really about erasing self-doubt, actually. But what I want to share with you is about exposing thinking for what it actually is, so that you can move beyond what's commonly known as the imposter syndrome and have a different way of being. Firstly, I want to pull on and go a bit deeper with that. Just because you think you have imposter syndrome, in quotation marks, doesn't mean to say that that's who you are. You may be having an experience of discomfort. You might be having a moment of doubt. You might be questioning yourself, challenging whether the information that you've got in front of you is accurate or correct. So, for example, I'll give you a real world example for me. So I'm very new to most technology. I didn't actually, because I spent 10 years working as a stage manager. I left. I went to drama school to study stage management. I didn't interact with a computer. It was all pen and paper. When I left there, I went to work in theatre. We didn't use computers other than occasionally as a word processor, but that was about it. So it wasn't until I left there and then started out in a different way of work, and then this kind of work appeared to me, that I then needed to learn how to use a computer. So I was in my 30s by the time I started doing that. So I often think, my thinking often goes into that I'm much slower at doing this because I feel like I'm in primary school learning the basics of how to use a computer, whereas I watch some of my friends and they're like, click, 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 boom, 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 just do that. There's a shortcut there. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. Always on a learning curve where tech is concerned. We spent a lot of time being caught up in this world of, well, I must be an imposter because I'm pretending I know what I'm doing. And it's like, actually, that's not true. That's not accurate. There are some things I know what I'm doing, and there are some things I'm learning to do. And there's a lot where tech is concerned, which I have zero idea or even inclination to go towards. So why should I be beating myself up that I don't know how to do that? So very often what we need to do is start to look for, instead of being caught up in this identification of I have imposter syndrome, is recognize firstly that it's an experience. I may be experiencing that, but let me look at the facts. So the other one that I will use, which comes up very, very often in the workshops, is I've started a new job. It's pretty much always I've started a new job. And when they say that, it's usually within the first year. I've started this new job and I'm having imposter syndrome about being in it. So my questions are around, okay, well, let's look at the evidence. So did you lie on the application form or your CV at all? If you did, then yes, that's fraudulent. So that's understandable why you're having that thinking. And maybe that's a different conversation and look at things in a different way. But everyone that I've spoken to so far has gone, God, no, of course it didn't. I didn't even embellish anything. And I'm like, okay, so therefore the information you initially shared to apply for that post is factually correct. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. When you went for your interviews, did you lie at any point during that? No, not lie. I might have kind of twisted things a little bit. And I'm like, well, that's partly why you're experiencing that fraudulent thinking, is because as your thinking knows, it wasn't 52, it was 45. It wasn't you that did something, it was the team. And you know that. It's like, well, that's a learning. So that's partly why you're experiencing that way of thinking now. So when you go to interviews, be accurate. And then you're not going to have this, oh no, they're going to find me out. But you've also been in post for X period of time. So has anybody at any point gone, you can't do this job? And I haven't yet had anyone say no, say that they have experienced that rather. Okay, so what feedback have you been getting? And I would say 95% of the time, the persons that I'm asking will say, oh, that I'm doing a really good job, or they're glad that I'm part of the team. It's extremely rare that I've had a conversation with somebody who's then gone, oh yeah, everyone hates me and they think I'm doing a rubbish job, because they would have left by now. But what they recognize is there's some kind of discord, I can't think of the right word, between the disparity, is that the right word? Between the evidence, which is the evidence is I'm getting great feedback, I'm really enjoying the work, I'm having a good time, and thinking is going, oh, it doesn't deserve to be this easy, or they're going to find me out at some time, I'm making this up, or I'm blagging it. The thinking is saying one thing, but actually the evidence is something completely different. And to me, you've got a choice there. You either listen to the imaginations of the thinking, or you stick with the evidence. And that's what I'd encourage you to do. So the second part of this, as well as dropping the identification, is then looking for the evidence and collect it. Some people call this a brag folder. Some people call it their confidence folder. I've got a client who calls it her trust folder. I don't care what you name it, but collect an evidence of not only where people are giving you feedback, and that feedback could be as simple as thank you. Collect it. It might be way more than that of, the way that you handled that was amazing. It might be verbal. It might be in an email. Collect it so that when you are having those moments of, Bob doesn't think I can do this job, go, well, I'm pretty sure that Bob sent me an email a while back saying thanks for a particular piece of work that I did. Let me just go and remind myself. You've got the evidence. And what I notice when you start doing that, when your thinking goes, oh, I can't, or I'm doubting, and you show evidence, it's like that calms down then. It takes a while, but evidence is key. It's so important to do, to keep pushing you, keep challenging the thinking. Rather than just accepting the thinking, is challenge that thinking. Is that even factual? Is it even true? And that's the next part that I would push you to do. Because thinking is not fact. Thoughts are not fact. Thoughts are simply that. They're thoughts. All thoughts are just that. They're thoughts. They might be close to fact, but are they really as accurate as they can possibly be? Now, what I notice is for so many of us, and again, I include myself within this, is being accurate is a real challenge that we seem to have, because thinking likes to go, oh no, this will do. Chuck that word in there. This will be fine. But being accurate is something that can be helpful, especially when we have thinking such as I'm not enough. Well, what does that even mean? Well, what's the measurement system that's being used there? What comparison is being used? Is the comparison accurate? Oh, yeah, but, it was just lucky that I got this. Well, what does that really mean? What's the definition of luck? And what's being used there? Because it's simply a thought. And unless you challenge it, it's going to have weight. But at some point, I'm pretty sure that you believed in something, be it Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, that you no longer believe in. And this is the same thing. We can change that thinking just by challenging it, looking for those facts. Byron Katie, who is a spiritual teacher, she has simple questioning, which is it true? Is it absolutely true? And it's fascinating how I know for myself, anytime I really check, it's like the thought that seemed like it was made out of marble and immovable suddenly crumbles. it's got no standing because it's been seen as not being accurate or true. And the final thing that I would offer out here as a suggestion with this term, imposter syndrome, is stop calling it that. Yes, I absolutely agree that people have imposter thinking. I can't do this. I think it was a fluke that I got this. Doubting yourself. I'm pretty sure that they think I'm way more capable than I really am. All of that kind of thinking. Absolutely, I get it happens. And it is thinking that when you look at it, looks like it's saying, I'm a fraud, I'm an imposter, I shouldn't be here. I get that. But it's not a syndrome. It's not something that needs identification with, because then it does become concretized and it seems immovable. But simply by changing the term imposter syndrome to imposter thinking, that gives you an opportunity to go, this is thinking. Then you can use the other steps that I've mentioned about, is it true? Is there evidence to back it up? Can I challenge this? Can I actually push back on it and just recognize that it's just a thought that I'm having in this moment, which doesn't make it true, doesn't make it something that I've got to follow through on. It doesn't make it anything other than it just being a thought. And it's certainly what has, I know with so many and myself, that by removing the imposter syndrome as a term and recognizing it as as the thinking, that's made a big difference. It's taken something that has seemed very heavy and immovable into something that's got a possibility of shifting. And that's what I wanted to offer out with you today. What I notice is that the term tends to come up for many people when they're experiencing discomfort, and they're often in a moment of time, however long that time may be, of unknown, not knowing what's coming next, or it's new, it's a new experience. And that's why that thinking often comes to the fore, because they don't know how to think about this new thing that they've got. So it's like, for myself, I often think about it of going to a new city. I don't know the culture. I don't know the way of the land. I don't know how to find my way around. I don't know where my new favorite cafe is going to be. So let me get curious. Rather than getting caught up in this, oh my gosh, I don't know it, fearful thinking, let me be curious with it and go, okay, well, let me have a go at this cafe, or let me go online and research for a cafe, or let me go and explore. Let me see what is possible for me to learn in that place of, or in that thinking of being open and curious, rather than being caught up in this concretized, heavy thinking that has been labeled a syndrome. So I would love to know if you've ever experienced imposter thinking, and if so, how has that imposter thinking shown up for you? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know your experiences of this. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and also hit that notification button, whichever platform that you're on, because these do go out every single week. And if you want to make sure you get those reminders, then make sure that you hit that notification button. I'm looking forward to reading your comments about imposter syndrome / imposter thinking, to understand what you would like to know more about this topic, if anything, what your experiences of it are. And I look forward to speaking to you again on another episode of Coming to Your Senses.